Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's edition of Fake Accents Unite. A bit more of a full panel this week compared to our pure offering of myself and the Britisher last week. But of course, we are joined by the Britisher. Good evening, sir.
You mean to say you let these women on?
I have let women onto the channel, yes, because as you understand, the women have been banned from the Academic Agents channel for the time being.
Well, there is that. Yes,
We are refugees.
He refuses point
What are you
blank.
doing on there, Mark?
Well, sorry.
What are you doing on there?
Oh, rude! I have you know that I exemplify a mixture of peak masculinity and youthful exuberance. And
well, you're not called Ivan Rebrov for nothing, are you?
well, only by you, Britisher. As you can hear, we are also joined this evening by Zarathustra, daughter of Albion, who's going up in the world at the moment, from what we can see, judging by her YouTube channel. Good evening.
Yeah.
And we're also joined by Poe the Person, who joins us from presumably bed at this point, looking after the baby. Good evening.
This is the most reclined I've ever been while streaming, and I have to say, I can get used to this.
Yes,
I'm fully horizontal.
eventually you'll get to the point where, or humanity will progress to the point where we can just go around and... No, that's the plot to WALL-E, isn't it? Where everyone ends up in chairs, floating around, anything you want from a cup.
Yes, and my companion's also introducing herself. I'll keep my...
Ooh. Some fuzzy noises. I
would just point out that the Romans kind of perfected a kind of style of living while reclined, but sadly it only applied to a very small percentage of their population.
Yes.
Has anyone ever documented how long it takes the Britisher to bring up the Romans in any given stream over time?
Now, don't give away the secret. Don't tell them about the
Secret.
bad.
What you don't realise is there is somewhere out there a spreadsheet with all of the Britishers' anecdotes, and I just press a key on the keyboard, and it zaps his jar in just the right way to stimulate the correct Romans anecdote for the time.
Oh.
Well, actually, I remember hearing once that this does seem to be something that lawyers like to do sometimes.
Stimulate themselves with anecdotes from the Romans.
To basically have bets amongst each other as to whether they, how long it will take them to mention this or that in their particular monologue, or if they can build certain words into their speeches, or even into their questioning. This, of course, is the art is not to let on to the judge that this is going on, because of course the judge, having been a lawyer himself one day, he will be highly aware that these kind of things go on. So if suddenly very strange vocabulary starts appearing in court, then no doubt the judge will be onto them fairly quickly. So yes. It's a kind of putting it in a manner that you can kind of sneak it by him, if you know what I mean. And I mean, more than likely, the rest of the court will be pretty much nonplussed as to what's going on, if you know what I mean.
I think university students still do this, because every now and again you'll get like the word cucumber in an essay on Milton or something, and you think,
Yep.
I think this is a game, and it'll come up 3 or 4 times another one.
I mean, if you've, I don't know, you've got a trial on, I don't know, financial fraud or something like that, and then suddenly in one of the exchanges, one of the lawyers mentions the Bikini Atoll. You know that there's more
your lawyer, Britisher,
going on, if you know what I mean.
Yes, when this anecdote, this metaphorical example you're bringing up is highly irregular.
It reminds me of the Godwin's law, where
oh yes,
the longer an argument goes on, the more likely it is someone will bring up Hitler. Which after I heard that, it really put me off making any kind of Hitler or Nazi comparisons. So I try not to do it now. Try to be more creative with using historical comparisons.
But haven't you read the book "Everyone I Don't Like Is a Nazi"? It's a guide to modern political argument in the current age.
So what you're saying is that there are certain things you would like to say, but you fear saying, which incidentally is exactly the sort of society the Nazis would have wanted.
Well, you've already lost the argument, Godwin Britisher. There, unfortunately, I like just deepening the Britisher lore a bit here. What you see here is the perfected final product of the Britisher, but what you don't see are all the clones that I had made of him that currently live in an old folks' home, much like the priests of Craggy Island when they get old and slightly mental, and they're sitting there broken in their chairs, trying to say things about the Romans and mixing up all the dates and so on and so forth.
So in that case, the other prototypes they are at least still functional, even though not necessarily.
Highly dysfunctional. They do have to be looked after 24/7. Not that you don't.
It's not like that. Like that film with the magicians, where one of them has.
Oh, The Prestige.
Dozens and dozens of replicas of himself drowned in a box. Yes.
Well, that is a spoiler.
That film was, in one way, incredibly predictable.
Yes, you say it's a spoiler. It's not really a spoiler because you can see it coming a mile off.
But a number of the other twist is one that you don't see coming. But the
no, you do. I'm sorry,
well,
you do.
You do. Fine. You do. But the British that film I consider to be highly overrated. I don't know whether or not it's just me and the British who've seen it, but it is nearly 3 hours long, and neither of the main characters are likable enough for you to want to see the thing through to the end. You just don't care.
Scarlett Johansson is.
There's I know, but her story is somewhat smaller, and you just go. Sorry,
David Bowie plays scientist Nikola Tesla. What could you want from the film?
He has the best scenes, it has to be said. There's a great opening where he walks through lightning to introduce himself. It's great.
I watched it when I was, I think, 15, which might be showing my age. I don't know when the film came out, but it was on DVD by the time, and I was completely gobsmacked. It's one of those films that 15-year-olds love, I think.
It's so deep.
I think it came out roughly at the same time as The Illusionist, did it not?
Which is a film I much prefer.
Yes, it's a much superior film.
I'll watch that one.
It's good. I think is it Edward Norton who's in that one? I can't remember. But they did really well because aside from there's only one trick in it I think where they used any form of CGI, which was a growing tree, but that was really good. And much more likable characters, I have to say, than the portrayals of Hugh Jackman and who was it?
Christian Bale.
Christian Bale, yeah. So a couple of super chats come in. Sitzgoen says, whilst I may be 1,209,329 seconds late this week, your cumulative lateness is well above 2 months. He's been keeping track this entire time of how often we're late and how much by.
I'm beginning to think that actually the claim that the cuckoo clock was invented in the Schwarzwald in Germany is incorrect.
Oh, yes.
Somehow I've got the feeling the Scandinavians seem sufficiently pedantic for being the people to invent that thing.
Nonsense. They have no
sufficiently
need...
cuckoo, is that what you mean? Sufficiently cuckoo.
Yes, definitely.
They never needed to develop any external clocks. Their internal clock clearly works to the second relatively accurately.
Does it tick you off, Mark?
Oh God. Yes, it ticked off. Very weird. Or more tocked off. British Knight says, evening all, a 20-year-old Britisher took his ultimate revenge on the Iberian Peninsula by spreading the Spanish flu, killing 500 million people worldwide. Time is repeating itself, it seems.
Yes, I was just about to say, I'm not really sure whether it was just spread around the Iberian Peninsula. It's perhaps a slight understatement, isn't it?
Yes, there were only 500 million people in that peninsula. It was very, very crowded. Real estate was very expensive. This is because there is a new mystery illness spreading in China, is it?
All right, what am I about to get in a few months' time?
50 people have come down with a previously unknown strain of some disease. So I'm expecting, obviously, it sounds very familiar to a sort of a Plague Inc. evolved scenario. So naturally, in the next 5 years, we'll all be down with it, and it'll mutate total organ failure or some nonsense like that, and we'll all die. But not to be too bleak.
British first.
British first. Yes.
I have no doubt that if anybody is going to be struck down with that thing, it's going to be me. Yes.
You're a trooper, Britisher. You always do these streaks through. You'll be the only one to survive as well. You must be so well conditioned to it.
It'll just take him 3
6
times
weeks
as long
to get over the last flu. Just imagine what that thing is going to do to me.
Since Goen mentioning that what am I about to get in a month's time is clearly communism. That'll be the disease that you contract.
Well, it does come from China.
And there is a great wall there for you to perch upon when you contract it.
Oh my goodness, sorry.
I wonder whether one of the side effects is that your knees stiffen so that you can only goose step.
I love that. Oh, I was only just had a bit of joint trouble, sir.
Yes, I cannot help. I'm going to have to direct you to the Ministry of Silly Walk, sir.
Tell it.
So it's going again saying, this week you're 374.4 seconds late. Take note of how NSO blamed the guests for being tardy, instead of just keeping calm and carrying on. I didn't need to blame the guests. I only need to blame one guest, and that's my illustrious co-host, the Britisher, who decided to turn up 3 minutes late. Yes. Always a pleasure to have you on the show, Britisher. Have I mentioned that?
Of course. You really sense how that is heartfelt.
I like the chat is saying you're an incubator, Britisher, for all these diseases. It's simple. Are you actually the source of vaccines worldwide as well?
Of everything, yes. I'm the source of all evil.
You need to stop
yes.
a Pandora's Britisher, if you will. You need to stop basically volunteering yourselves for all these flu trials. That's what I need to. That's what I.
Well, I mean, who knows? Perhaps I was the one who gave Pandora her box.
Just my mind goes to the worst places. But Dr. Donald Paris says, "Good evening. Hope everyone is doing well. Thank you very much for that. And so does Drug Shovel. Hello, all. I hope you're all well. Are we all well, everybody?"
You don't expect me to answer that with yes, do you?
The Britisher clearly is in the peak of
delighted to be here.
in the peak of physical condition. Sarah is delighted, and Poe is tending to a child, so I assume she's happy as well.
Yeah, I just I rolled over in bed and elbowed my little daughter in the face. She was very unhappy about it.
When the inevitable child abuse case comes to court, you know they'll take that clip and use it against you. Let's try to avoid
Yes,
that.
I think there is. You've more than likely watched Boris Johnson playing rugby in Japan once or twice too often.
What?
Yeah, yeah, I know the bit he talks about. Yeah.
Oh,
You must know it, Mark.
Sorry?
You must know it. The clip.
I do know it, yes. I was just trying to work out what the reference was, and then, yes, elbowing a child in the face. Okay, yes. Mighty Balzac says 20-year-old Britisher was hunker burning love. Do you understand this reference, sir?
Absolutely not at all.
Well,
It's an Elvis Presley song.
sorry?
Oh.
You
is
light my morning sky with burning love. It's one of the lyrics.
Oh, I see.
Elvis Presley.
Was a hunker burning love?
Yeah, burning love is the name of the song.
Yeah, that's one of the odder descriptions of the British show we've had so far, I think, on the show. But you're accumulating them now. I wonder how many things that we've managed to ascribe to you now, British.
Britisher.
Well, what can I
I've
say?
been saying to him this evening.
And finally, of course, Makuta Pterodact says, I restate this that I coined over a year ago. The Great Wall of China was built for the Britisher as there were no fences suitable for him to sit on. Now, of course...
This depends on which Wall of China we're actually talking about. I mean, for one, the thing is in bits. And
Well, it wasn't when it was
secondly,
built,
Yeah, I
presumably.
wasn't intended
no,
to be
no,
that
no,
way.
no. It's not a continuous single wall. It's pieces of wall, really. And at the same time, that which you see today, I believe, is actually a 15th century version or something like that.
Hmm.
Right.
So the earliest walls were much smaller and less substantial, if you know what I mean.
Were they also thinner and more made of a series of posts, as it were, that go along with connecting
But no, I
material
don't
in
think
between?
they ever kind of built anything wooden. I think that even they realised that would have been pointless.
Well, no, of course, it was all stainless steel, cheap stuff from China, yeah?
Of course, yes. But in the days of the Romans, when the Romans built walls, the Roman walls were actually superior to the Chinese walls of the
They weren't
same
very high
day.
though, were they, Brisha?
Sorry?
They weren't very high though, were they?
Well, not if Stephen Fry were to be believed.
Okay then.
I like to think that...
But actually, they were of considerable height. Actually, there's an interesting, terribly boring to most people, more than likely, but interesting to, complete Roman nerds such as myself. There's an interesting point along Hadrian's Wall where there's an odd little corner.
Okay.
And it appears that they built the wall to a certain thickness and then suddenly changed their mind. So they thought, okay, look, this is getting ridiculous. So we'll make it less thick.
It's too
So suddenly,
girthy.
from one moment to the other, the thickness changes. They didn't even sort of grade it, if you know what I mean. They just basically changed it by a foot or two. So there is that sort of chink when it's taken out of the wall, and from then on it just continues at a different width.
I'm sorry, Britisher. You can't say chink, it's racist.
I knew we were going to say that. I'm like,
Oh, well, yes, of course.
If that's the phrase that gets us demonetized
Get him
this
off.
evening, that's the...
It's all my fault.
Hilarious
Yes,
if it
yeah,
was.
yeah.
entirely the British fault.
So all I would need to say is those Romans that continued with the narrower wall were rather niggardly.
It's quite a good strategy, I think, is if you have a very thick wall so that the enemies know that it's hopeless getting through, and then you can just periodically make it thinner in some places to save on resources, and they won't know where to attack.
Yes, yeah, but I think more than likely it dawned on them that the idea that the Scots would be arriving with siege engines was perhaps a bit far-fetched. So there wasn't really the need to kind of build it, in order to withstand artillery barrage.
Yes, the Scots wouldn't be caught dead dismantling or, for goodness sake, assembling a trebuchet. It's far too French.
That story about the English going to Scotland and bringing a trebuchet. I think they referred to it as the wolf at the time.
Touche.
And the Scots had never seen such a thing. And I believe there was one Scottish castle that the English kind of laid siege to, and the Scots thought they could hold out. And then the English kind of took their time over a period of a few days assembling their trebuchet. And I think they fired one shot and the Scots surrendered. It just basically went through their defences like butter.
As it does.
They just decided, okay, we get it. Clearly, these defences aren't quite up to this weapon.
Okay, don't reload. We'll save the architecture. Thank you very much. What people don't actually realise is that trebuchets didn't really utilise, just what was lying around. They had very specific, ammunition made for them or brought across for them.
Well, you say that. I've got the feeling that more than likely after they dispensed with the first 24 shot or so, rather than say, hang on, I haven't finished carving this one yet, they would more than likely get a little more lax, if you know what I mean.
Well, it's more than likely that they utilised these stones that they brought with them, and then after that, they simply made use of whatever rubble it was that they have created with that masonry, as it were.
Well, I mean, not necessarily, because you would, stepping up to the masonry if the enemy is still there, and you would assume he would have to be if you would still want to shoot at him, might be somewhat dangerous. So you would most likely have to find, stones lying about the countryside.
I was going to say, did they ever fire off burning pitch, or is that just in the movies?
I'm not sure that they actually did set fire to much when they did it, because there was also the trouble that most of the things that you're assaulting with trebuchets happen to not be flammable. You use the trebuchet for dealing with heavy armaments. So what you would more likely have is you could. Some people had potentially slings where they would throw oil and then potentially try and set it on fire, but it was less likely because, of course, as soon as you have anything which is on fire that flies through the air, it tends to go out.
Yeah, that's why I was thinking
risk
burning
element.
Yes. Who did we lose someone, or did someone come in?
I'm
Or...
back.
Oh, welcome back.
Sorry, I kicked off by accident.
It's quite all right. Yeah, the big issue, in the same way that fire arrows are a Hollywood invention. Lindy Beige has a really good video on it.
Yes, I've seen the Lindy Beige video. We all have. It's
We've
got
all seen the
5
Lindy
billion
Beige.
views.
So here I am trying to sound smart, but I just regurgitate Lindy Beige to you all. That's what it is.
Well, I mean, then
hope
there
you
are
can make it
all
on.
those questions regarding Greek fire, aren't there? As to how it came about and whether that Greek fire that was actually used in Constantinople was the original Greek fire, because there seem to be various other fire weapons described. But eventually, yes, when Constantinople started using their Greek fire, it was a bit of a monster, because I believe you could only put it out with vinegar.
With the napalm of the ancient age.
Yeah, and that's how they managed to take care of all the fleets that try to attack Constantinople by sea. That basically they could just simply set them alight.
Was the fluid that they used, was it did it float as well? So it didn't really matter how accurate necessarily they were.
Like the Battle of Blackwater Bay.
To be honest, I don't know that. I don't know whether it floated or not.
Dreadfully disappointed in you, British.
I know. When I was there, I forgot to ask them whether it would float or not.
You think you're getting fed this evening? It's not happening. I like to think that you're you're actually the source of the rhyme for Humpty Dumpty at this point, Britisher.
Okay.
Because that's how I acquired your brain. This is
What a strange thing to say.
He fell from the wall. We couldn't put you together again, so now that you're on my shelf.
I see.
This makes sense. Sorry, I wanted to say it earlier, but it just didn't come in, so I needed to slot it in there somewhere.
She was in pieces about it.
Oh, Sarah. You've been reading too many Christmas crackers, haven't you?
That's true enough. That's true enough. Home over Christmas. The combination of Christmas crackers and Dad.
An overwhelming combination, certainly. Of course, we can't go too far this evening without mentioning the sad news that, unfortunately, Roger Scruton has passed away and from cancer. So I just want to take a moment to say, that to acknowledge that and just say it's a terrible shame that he's gone. It's really
It's so lovely.
Great loss. I wish very disappointed. Did I can't remember who it was. Did you meet him at all, Sarah, this year? Was it you who said that?
Yes, only very briefly at the Edinburgh Book Festival, and I just got him to sign his new book on Wagner. I was going to ask him what his favourite poem was, but I panicked and I asked what his favourite colour was.
Oh no!
He was a very nice gentleman. He was very lovely.
What was his favourite colour?
I think it's a green. Thankfully, I didn't ask it publicly. It was just in a queue of people.
Like, what is your it's like that scene from Monty Python.
Monty Python,
isn't it? Where they're on the bridge. It's like, what is your favourite colour? No, red, no blue.
He was so lovely that he even answered, but only very briefly. But he always comes across as such a nice man.
I'm staggered to hear that he actually wrote an entire book on Wagner.
He's written
He's
2.
got about 60 books. Yeah,
He's got
not on Wagner.
He has.
Because I would have thought hyperbolic German rubbish wouldn't really need that much.
How dare you?
British.
I look forward to reading your book on Wagner, Britisher.
What
he
a
ha-
thing to take a
Well,
bold
as I say, it
stance
wouldn't fill a
on.
book. It wouldn't fill a page, would it? It wouldn't fill a
Well, you can
line.
write a limerick. I'll
Really.
take it in limerick form if you've got it.
I believe Scruton was a member of like
Hey.
the Wagner Society or something to
Wagner.
that extent. So he went and he gave talks at the Wagner Society.
Good, he's so lovely. He's so
And-
clever.
And yes, he has 62 works.
Wow.
Which
And
is
and he has fiction too, doesn't he? Quite a few.
yeah.
Really?
That's just his non-fiction contributions. He has about a dozen or more fiction contributions as well.
Mhm.
Which is
Or any of those sort of lists of compilations of articles or that sort of thing.
sorry,
Are they
say
all
again?
actual?
No,
Are they-
they're actual books across a very wide range of topics. There's only, I believe, one thing I saw, which was an article thing, and I excluded that. So yes, he's done.
Can't believe what Britisher is saying here.
But
Well, I'm not one for Wagner. I think you've gathered that by now.
the man is not cold yet, Britisher, and yet you spit on him.
I take this as a gross insult to the legacy of Mr. Scruton.
So hang on a moment. I must like Wagner. Something
for at least a week until things have passed.
I couldn't. You've got it exactly.
But yes, it's a terrible shame. I was speaking to Helen Dale, actually, who's a columnist and who normally writes about legal things and Brexit and so on and so forth. And
Oh, she's not. Yeah, I know her. She writes for Quillette sometimes, isn't she?
yes,
She's an academic. Yeah, she's pretty good.
she's lovely. But we were talking about his last article, and he said that being close to death makes you appreciate things, and the best thing to appreciate is gratitude. And I thought that was just a very touching article. Actually, I was surprised.
Oh, I have to find that. Yeah, if you could, you have to send that to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's got so many. It just took a couple of days before he died. I was looking on his website to see what he might be writing next. If he was doing better. And I didn't realize, but they had their own farm and they had an apple festival every year, and writing retreats. It's so charming.
Yes, he went on. I'm trying to think. He called it Scrutopia or something like that, which was the name of his
Writing school.
His writing retreat.
Oh.
And he was
Scrumping with Scruton.
Scrumping with Scruton.
That'll be awesome. I might have to name my ode to Scruton video that, Britisher, if that's okay. Scrumping with Scruton.
Well, there you go.
He was actually
Britisher.
He actually was when he received word of the that he was potentially going to die within a week unless he was seen by his oncologist. He actually decided that he would read six books that week because he wanted to finish those before he potentially went, which was
really.
I just detested.
I love that he did that. That's yeah. That
And
just shows you the kind of person he is.
And he never stopped.
Sarah sounds as if she's just been introduced to a particularly cute puppy, doesn't she?
Oh yes.
I'm all over the place this evening. It's a combination of hearing the baby gargling, and I just had a very nice brioche, which was very satisfying, and now I'm sad about the Scruton. It's all coming together.
I believe he also continued to work up until December on the commission, commission he was given for architecture and beauty and whatnot. But he has several anecdotes. It's very worth. I will link after the stream finishes the article. From the
I'd like to read
Spectator.
that.
So there's that. People saying Scrutopia is not a very good choice of words.
It's a bit, yeah.
You
bit
have
apple,
to be
isn't
very
it?
careful how you pronounce that, don't you?
Yes, it is. It's definitely a UT and not an EW. Let me see. I will. I'll end us off there, and I think it's very important to say that we should remember him for the great works that he did while he was alive, and not to wallow too much in his death.
Yes, I was just thinking there must therefore be a difference between Scruton's Scrutopia and Don McLean's Scrutopia.
Your obsession, shall we call it, with Don McLean and the way he cleans up in the dating game is something to be. I don't know if admired is the right word, but
Well,
something
I just
to be
wonder
noted.
what his cricketing average is. Yes.
Oh dear, Britisher. Okay, Architect of Fate says, coming into the chat late due to work. Hello, Sarah. It's good to see the Britishers' insatiable lechery has not run you off completely.
Well, I'm furious with him now, of course. So I'm, I'm
Yes.
thinking about it.
His insults to Wagner will not be made lying down.
No, to Scruton.
And to Scruton by extension.
By proxy, yeah.
Yes.
This is for my this is for my disrespecting Wagner.
Yes.
No, for your disrespecting of Scruton's penchant for Wagner.
Yes. Yeah. Which actually it's the same thing as not liking Wagner, really. Yes. Okay.
We'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at that.
Whatever.
I am definitely pronouncing this incorrectly, but Brodette says 20-year-old Britisher built the War Wolf to knock down Stirling Castle as it ruined his view. Britisher?
Well, what can I say? It was in the way.
It was. What was behind it? That's what I want to know.
Well, they didn't have planning permission.
Are you saying that you were the original proponent of planning permission and that you rolled around the country with your makeshift trebuchet, demolishing anything that offended your view?
Yes, it was the medieval way of dealing with, people who didn't have planning permission. What can I say?
Shocking. Maracuta Pterodact says, well...
Actually, did you just see that high-rise block in India that got knocked down because it didn't have proper planning permission?
No. How much?
It was a block of luxury. It's a high-rise block of luxury flats, and according to the news, they also knocked down a second one.
Good.
Half of India doesn't have proper planning permission.
And you sort of looked at it and you went, "Oof, that must have cost a fair whack to put that thing up."
Yeah.
And yes, down it went, dynamited in one. Yes, it was on the BBC today.
Good grief.
When I was in India, I was told when I was in India as a fact that there was no such thing as planning permission, which I suppose.
Surely half of India is.
I have a strong feeling that not having planning permission in this particular case meant having paid your bribes to the wrong official.
Yes. Your planning permission, sir, is coming. Speaking of planning permission, do any of you know about a man named Albert Dryden?
No.
Never heard. If it's worth a watch. I believe Count Dankula's done a video on him as one of his absolute mad lads, and he was a man who decided that he would buy a piece of land to build a cottage or a house on, and he just basically fluffed all his planning permission and so on and so forth, and they kept messing. He had a friend in the council, and a friend tried to help him out, and it all went terribly wrong, and ended up.
It wouldn't be the gentleman who built the Killdozer, would it?
No, it is not. It is a man who an Englishman who I believe is English anyway, and he basically had built most of this stuff, and the council told him, "You have to demolish this building that you've created," and he said, "No, I built this all myself by hand. I'm not going to do that." Apparently, he was very inconsistent on what the building would be used for. He actually had a pistol, and when they came to, and he was had a history of being violent, but when they came to demolish the house, he basically stood there with a pistol, claimed that he had landmined the entire estate, and told everyone to go away, pretty much. And at this point, he'd fallen out with his friend in the council. And when they tried to come in, he shot one of them. He shot this guy, and it was all a big.
It's the sort of thing Wagner would have done.
It was a Webley, not a Wagner pistol.
Why is a mad lad?
And he's a mad lad because there was a whole lot of thing about planning permission. What's considered to be excessive planning permission? Should we have it in the first place?
Actually, I recall hearing once, I think it was in California, but it could have been another state, that there was some problem with planning permission regarding Clint Eastwood's house. And there was all sorts of trouble about it. Something that protruded was somehow 30 centimeters too high. And therefore, there was no end of bureaucracy about it.
Okay.
So Clint Eastwood solved it the only way Clint Eastwood could. He stood for mayor,
Sick.
won in a landslide,
Yep.
Weird.
changed the rules, and stood down again.
Amazing.
Oh, amazing.
It was just one of those, as in, you have
I
got to
love
be
that.
kidding me. So this is so petty, this
Brilliant.
is so ridiculous. And apparently he didn't so much stand on a ticket of, oh, I'm Clint Eastwood, vote for me. He stood as in, if you're annoyed with petty rubbish like this, vote for me.
Absolutely nobody
Love
watching
that.
this will appreciate this, but there is an episode of the Gilmore Girls that has that exact plot.
Well, there you go.
I don't know if it was based on true events or whether, maybe it was the other way around, but
You see, this is why I have you on.
remarkable.
This is why I've invited you on, Poe, to bring a bit of class and decorum to the stream.
Some culture.
So, sorry, Sarah.
Hey.
Sarah's here for the puns.
Yes.
Hey for the band. Yeah, I'll take that.
The
I'm merely here to talk about my appreciation of Don McLean.
I see. Well, it's less about Don McLean.
And my dislike of Wagner.
Yes, you're a very two-note kind of guest, aren't you, Britisher? Always going on about your dislike of Wagner and your love of Don McLean. Never mind that.
It's not even 24 hours since he's dead, and slagging
Yeah.
off.
Just honestly, if you're subscribed to the Britisher right now, I think you need to rethink your life. See how many subscribers that loses me.
Don't worry, I'll just blame it on YouTube.
Yeah. Makuta Pterodax, referring back to the Humpty Dumpty quote, says, "Well, you were one of the Queen's men in the army, apart from the fact that I was definitely in the Air Force and not the army." And but yeah, I appreciate the sentiment. Yes, that's why I was attempting to put the Britisher back together. And once it was clear that only his brain could be saved, I bravely volunteered to take it on. Not knowing, of course, that
you just watched one episode of Red Dwarf too many.
not knowing, of course, the hell that awaited me once I actually got the brain on life support, and they told me that actually I was now its legal guardian. Horrendous.
I
Chris-
was thinking when you said that about the British's brain, I was thinking you could quite easily automate the process by having an AI listen for certain keywords, and then when there was an appropriate Roman anecdote, you would just completely automated, and the Britisher would just spew the related, however tenuously.
Well,
spew the related
Poe.
story.
As an engineer yourself, I'll have to bring you on commission to sort out my electrocution of the Britisher system to ensure that he gets just the right amount of stimulation at the right times. People are asking, was I RAF regiment? No, I was an air traffic control officer. So there's that.
So you were the one sitting behind a microphone going, no, down a bit, no, up a bit. Sorry.
Well, it was
Moving
a little bit more complicated than that, but yes. Christian Chad says, more of Sarah is always worth a super chat. No, you see the reason to have the ladies on, aside from anything else? It's profitable. Just bought another book by Sir Roger in remembrance. He will be dearly
Actually,
missed.
can I just
Which
ask
one?
Sorry, can I just ask the air traffic controller? Is it actually normal for one to be in a intercity train and to be able to see the underside of a fighter jet as it turns away from you?
It depends how much you've pissed it off, really.
Because I actually did have an incident like that once. Yes.
What, where you flew over someone and they saw the undercarriage?
No.
You exposed your undercarriage to someone, Britisher?
It was that, how shall we say, the RAF was taking low flying to such new heights that it was...
New low heights, yes.
Yeah, precisely. They were pretty much skimming the grass with the tip of their wings, if you know what I mean. And given that there was a bit of a valley, from sort of the embankment of the train line, as we were travelling along, and this plane sort of just roared into existence next to us and turned away from us. We were We were pretty much, yes, looking at the undercarriage. We were looking at the belly of the plane as it turned away from us. So, yeah. What can I say?
Sounds exciting.
Something tells me Goose and Maverick were in trouble that day.
One of the interesting, or I say interesting, slightly amusing anecdotes from air traffic control that I had was, I think it was whilst I was in, or shortly after I left the Air Force. There was basically there's a big training area above the North Sea, and that's where the Americans also like to come and play. And we had one group of British guys who were told, this is the quadrant that you're going to be flying around in, and they hadn't liaised well enough with the flight ops guys hadn't liaised well enough with the Americans, and the Americans decided that they were going to run an exercise through there at one point. And then to top it all off, so these two sets of aircraft are in the same area, which they shouldn't be, because despite the fact that there's an awful lot of space in the sky, you'd be surprised how often flight plans align and things are likely to collide if they're not managed correctly. So these aircraft come at the exact moment when these aircraft decided to intersect. The air traffic controller had a phone call from his wife and decided to leave the console room for 5 minutes so that he could have a chat on his lunch break. At which point, the aircraft had to do a rather finicky move where one went straight up in the air. One of our jets went straight up in the air in front of the American plane. For the life of me, I can't remember what it is. I think it was a tanker. And they basically went straight up in front of its nose, and there was probably, they reckon, about 30 feet in between them. And this was the only way that they could avoid colliding. And yes, that man got a considerable earful when all was said and done, because he came back to the ops room completely in chaos, because there's these pilots shouting at each other across the airways, going, "What on earth are you doing here, and why are you in my airspace, and why is no one responding to my calls?" Oh dear, pretty. That was a messy afternoon.
That would have
shall
been
we
the
say.
moment for the air traffic controller, rather than to panic, to basically just switch on the microphone and go, "This is Igor from Vladivostok. I hope you appreciate the joke."
Yes, because the Russians talking in our airspace would be the perfect thing.
I believe it.
Oh dear. Anyway, it was amusing to me. It was amusing to me at the time, especially knowing some of the air traffic controllers, who, to be fair to them, are usually competent. So,
I like it how you caveat that with "usually competent."
well, every job and all that, but to be fair, the incompetent types don't tend to last long. Not because we
Well, they
kill
do
them,
last
of course.
longer.
No
They
one could
last
ever
longer
prove
than
it if
the
we did.
pilots who are subject to the incompetent ones. Yes.
The amount of things that can be pushed onto flight ops is immeasurable. Let me leave it at that. Anyway, Ratfaced at $82 says F. So thank you very much. I presume that is in relation to Roger Scruton as opposed to Britishers' hatred of Wagner. British Knight says, planning permission. What are you, a statist? Hippity hoppity, get off my property. Thank you for that, British Knight. And here's an interesting one for you, Britisher. Drunk Shovel says, we should crowdfund an actual uniform for Britisher. Thoughts?
That sounds
Love
nice.
that.
What do you
What kind of uniform? Are we talking clown or?
A clown uniform? No.
For a moment there, I thought you were saying a crown. I thought, but this is perhaps going a bit
don't
far.
flatter yourself.
No, we don't want a crown. We simply want a uniform. We crowdfund a uniform, not a crown
I think
on
we
your
should all
uniform.
We'll all get uniforms, and then we can recreate the film Zulu. That'd be a good.
I like that. Or Zoolander.
Who gets to play the Zulu?
Zoolander? Good grief.
Who gets to play the Zulus? Some have got
The
the feeling
Zulus will be CGI.
those costumes won't take too much crowdfunding.
It depends. We'll have to diversify the cast a bit, shove some whites in
Well, I
there
think
to make sure it's
Justin
not...
Trudeau would surely volunteer.
Exactly what you beat me to the joke, British. I think that the funniest thing with Trudeau I saw actually recently was a meme which mentions that I think it was either Trudeau's mother, I think it was his mother, was photographed with Castro Fidel Castro at some point. And if you take a picture of Fidel Castro's face at the right angle and put it next to Justin Trudeau's face, there's an awful lot of similarity there.
I've seen that, yeah, that comparison.
Yes, I've no idea what that speculation's about. Nonsense, of course. Drug Shovel saying you need a Martini Henry as well. Britisher needs that as well. Are you aware of what a Martini Henry is, Britisher?
I am aware that a Martini Henry is a... Yes.
Marvellous. It's a rifle. It's a rifle. It's a lever action rifle.
I think it was the precursor to the Enfield, wasn't it?
I'm not that familiar with the history of the firearm, but I'm aware of the firearm itself. Drug Shovel again saying these uniforms are quite expensive. You see that beautiful red coat especially. Yes, Venetian red, isn't it, Britisher? That's the one that is supposed to be the colour of the uniform.
Red on the market at the time. Yeah,
exactly. And I have no doubt that it's quite expensive these days. There are a few more.
It's the art of looking ostentatious and cheap at the same time.
Somehow we managed to pull it off. The British would be the only ones to manage to look utterly stylish, whilst also being the emblem of thrift.
I love that.
There's a few stories that have come out this week in a more entertainment business news, and I do define it like that rather than the royals. You know what's coming. We have, of course, Harry and Meghan Markle, or should I say, Meghan Markle and her husband.
I you said Harry and Meghan Markle. There was a distinct sneer to the latter part there.
It's almost as if I have very little respect for the woman, Britisher. I don't know.
It's because she's black, isn't it? Let's face it. It's because she's black.
Oh yeah. It's not like she's only just barely black, and I am not racist.
No, it couldn't be that.
No, it couldn't be. Of course, this is.
I wonder what Stormzy thinks.
Well, indeed, yeah. Have we heard from David Lammy yet, or?
I mean, she's clearly an agent of Lammy.
I've heard of Afua Hirsch or Hirsch.
Yeah.
Hirsch.
She was on the BBC this morning, and I'm told she was also on I think on ITV. So she was doing the rounds this morning, and of course assuring everybody that it was just intolerable how much racism poor Meghan Markle was exposed to.
Oh, for goodness sake.
She's a poor love, isn't she?
And you just think, I'm sorry, but this is ridiculous. It's fairly obvious that this is an attempt at becoming a sort of Kardashian / Beyonce.
I think it's also much more likely that people would harbour resentment towards her for being an American than for being black in this case.
Well, I mean,
like that Hollywood
being American is unforgivable.
Like kind of like not even Hollywood, because she was a D-list celebrity. It was just more like I suppose like e-celeb thought that she happens to be. But another interesting take, because she plans to take Harry away to Canada, and they're trying to negotiate at the moment how much time that they'll break between Canada and the UK, and how much money they'll have access to, and all sorts. And but people have mentioned that there's an awful lot of the hallmarks of emotional abuse in their relationship. She's very much following the typical pattern of an abuser, separating him from his family and friends, and then taking him away to her side. There's a really interesting video actually of Harry and Meghan at a party, and they're just talking with a group of people, and no one is talking to Meghan. So what she does is she steps into the middle of the circle in front of Harry and introduces herself, and he is shunted off to the side, and he just looks slightly dejected and sort of sad and left alone at the side. I'll try and find it on Twitter and to send it out later for those of you who follow me on there. But it was just one of those bizarre things.
Can I do the Britisher thing and take the devil's advocate side? Cause
sure, absolutely.
I think that being married to a royal would be absolute hell, just because of all of the lack of privacy, all the things she complained about, and people are saying, oh, boo-hoo, you get to be super rich and famous. But I honestly think being famous would be one of the worst ways to live, and I can sympathise with someone who would try to get away from that a bit.
Well, it's one of those things where you know what being a royal entails, and we know that Harry has always been sort of rejecting of that. That's why he, there were the stories of him in his younger days, and there were also him joining the army and how much he enjoyed doing that. But I also think that once you're in the royal family, you have to kind of it's all or nothing. You've got to embrace it, or you get nothing.
Yeah, I understand that she shouldn't have married a royal if she didn't want the limelight, but I feel a bit bad for her when I hear about people saying that she did this to get more attention, when I think most people, if already famous, probably know that getting even more attention, unless they get an actual profit from it, I think probably having more attention is the last thing she wants.
Well, I think she saw it as a way of getting a greater platform.
You think it's all a career move?
What I think she didn't realize was that when you're a royal, particularly if you're married to effectively, the spare tire, then your platform isn't that large. As in, okay, look, you get the money, you get some of the adulation, but at the same time, you do have to go and open kindergartens in Newcastle, in the pouring rain. But you don't get the platform. So we're not sending you to the United Nations as a women's spokesperson to talk about feminism. And I think that's where things really came unstuck. And I think also protocol more than likely wound her up considerably. The fact that she was married to a prince, but so too was Kate Middleton. And when they arrive, at the cathedral or whatever, who goes in first? To whom does the Archbishop of Canterbury upon whom does the Archbishop of Canterbury shower all his attention? Kate Middleton, not her. Why? Because she's married to the spare tire. And I think those sorts of things more than likely began to irk, because before this crisis, what we were all told was that there was a rift between the two couples.
Yeah.
And that only came about once Harry was married. And that rift, before people just think, oh, well, this was one for the gossip columns. Well, no, they announced that they were no longer going to be supporting the same charities and things like that. Something that previously had never been mentioned. And everybody seemed to be quite happy to work together on that one. No sooner is Harry married, announcements are made, that's no longer going to happen. And you just felt, well, yes, here was one bride not wanting to play second fiddle to the other bride. And, well, yeah, the problem is that the whole thing about monarchy and protocol is about, who has priority. So first it's the Queen, then it's Charles, then it's William, and then it's everybody else. And if you don't understand that, then you're in the wrong place.
I believe the correct term when talking about women fighting for status is called the pecking order. For someone for someone who's used to probably being at the top of the pecking order, it probably doesn't feel good to be slotted into this new family where you're no longer.
She's a sort of a Hollywood starlet. She's very pretty. This is somebody who is used to, getting a lot of attention. And suddenly she's basically told, okay, you're 13th in line when we're going to this place. And, well, why? I have got so many column inches in the newspapers last week. Well, that doesn't matter. Because you are merely married to someone who is the brother of someone. And that's the reality of it.
I think the Queen...
people, how much good... recently, obviously, Prince Andrew has been getting a lot of attention that he more than likely didn't want. But when you look at Prince Andrew and you look at Prince Edward, how much do they really still figure in anything? Not really, because with Charles effectively having secured his line of succession, they have effectively fallen by the wayside. It would take a major catastrophe to wipe out a coachload of royals to bring those two back in the line of succession. And effectively, with William now having children, the same has happened to Harry. And one needs to understand that. The whole thing is based on the lineage.
What I'm
Yeah,
expecting.
I don't really buy that. I mean, the royals don't really have anything to do with power, do they? It's just they're just the Kardashians, like you said. They're just a famous family. I don't think the lineage really even matters that much, except for, like you say,
I think it actually does a great deal when it comes to public events and whatever. And
yeah, I mean,
that's where I think someone who is used to being the center of attention being told that she is umpteenth in line, stuck in one's craw.
Yeah, it's just speculation. I mean, it's possible.
I mean, this show is the hallmark of Speculation Inc. So there is that.
Except for when it comes to the fact that Wagner, as
Britisher, shut your
is complete
trap.
rubbish, because that's absolute fact.
Dear. I tell you what, I'll move us on.
Show me your 4-part masterpiece.
This is when he does, and you're not going to like it. Yes. I'm sure the Britisher is much.
I told Ludwig van and Wolfgang Amadeus everything they knew.
Britisher was also. I'm sure you did, Britisher liar.
Latent perversion.
Britisher obviously is much more in favour of Austrian musicians than he is of.
What about failed
German.
Austrian painters?
No, the failed Austrian painters I tend to categorise in the same place as I do Austrian economists.
La la.
Funnily enough, they have similar moustaches.
That's the one to talk about with Mr. Sliceneek.
Guilt by association with mustache. There you go. The new IKB 4472 says, how easy is it to accidentally down a civil airliner? Surely there are FFID systems and such. Yeah, the planes squawk is the preferred term, where they basically send out a signal saying what they are and where they're from.
But does that still function if you're in a blind panic?
I mean, it's on. If you're flying, it's on.
Yes, but what I mean is, does that apply if you're in a blind panic?
Oh, I see. The people on the ground panicking,
yes,
as opposed to the aircraft. Oh, I doubt it. And I doubt that they potentially have the technology to read the squawk. But when it, for those of you who are wondering, this is about the airliner shot down in Iran, the Ukrainian Airlines, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's possible to jam such things using powerful signal blockers, but really the size of the thing in the first place should have clued them in that it was not a cruise missile, for instance. It was a very large aircraft, and it doesn't match. Like, a lot of commercial airliners really don't match the profile of any aircraft that are currently used in war.
Yeah, but this was more than likely a stealth passenger jet, you see.
Oh, yes. It plated in black reflective metals and lead lines so that no one knew it was there. I just... The whole thing with that, I feel like they wanted to send a message. They probably shot at whatever was in the area. And I also don't think that... I mean, Iran basically has no... They have an air force, but they don't really have quick reaction forces like we do over here. So the idea that they just shot at this thing without checking what it was...
what you're talking about. Those F5 copies they make look pretty fearsome.
You know, the ones that fall apart as soon as you look at them. Yeah.
Well, I mean, they've just recently managed to copy a design of the Americans that I think dates back to the 1970s.
There are amazing... I can't remember which plane it was that got shot down in 2014, but basically an American jet was lost. And the country it landed in, might have been Croatia, actually, couldn't find the wreckage. It took them 2 weeks to identify the lost site. And then all of a sudden, all of the Chinese planes suddenly got upgraded because with American-style tail fins. It was truly something to behold. The idea,
Amazing.
the innovation of the Chinese people in the wake of tragedy to ensure that this never happened again was amazing.
Well, that reminds one of the Humvee situation. You know, the company that produces the Humvees in America, they got into financial trouble, and then a Chinese company said that they were prepared to step in. But obviously, they needed to do their due diligence and look at the books and all the other matter to basically see whether this is a company they want to save and whether the products are actually such that they want to, that they think have a future. And what they did is they simply copied all the plans, then declined any interest, and since then, all the vehicles in the Chinese People's Liberation Army look like Humvees.
Funny.
I'm not kidding. It's true.
Yeah. No, I've no doubt, man. I'm sure. The yeah. So when it comes to shooting down an airliner, it was very deliberate. That was the key thing to get away from that. Although
what I found interesting
yeah,
was the fact that it took them so long
to come out and say they'd done it.
that they had shot down an airliner. Because, of course, they weren't trying to cover it up at all.
It was very clear that Iran itself, not just because the biggest thing that Iran's been concerned about in the wake of all this is the protests getting worse.
Yes.
They're actually, I think they're not actually that concerned. I think they're not that concerned that America is going to do all that much to them at the moment. I feel like they have done their missile strikes back. They've claimed that they killed 80 Americans, and that would be enough for them. And now, of course, they've managed to insult themselves by shooting down the airliner, and now America's saying, watch yourself.
What they've managed to do is they've created a situation whereby the protesters have a means of going out in the street and protesting about something which it is very difficult to put down.
They can't defend it.
If they go out and, if the protesters come out and they say, we want rid of this government, we want change, we want to get rid of the Islamic Republic and all that, then what they do, they send out their folks, their thugs on motorbikes, and they sort them out. And if need be, they just start using live ammunition.
Yes, this is the story from today.
If they come out and they start protesting about their own government having downed a passenger jet, something their own government has now admitted to, how exactly do the authorities clamp down on that? So it can then be used as code, if you know what I mean. So one can go out and one is actually protesting against the Islamic Republic and against the leadership and against this, but one claims it to be due to anger about the plane crash or the downed plane. That makes it very difficult for the government to basically, how do they actually morally justify it to themselves if they are actually going at a crowd that says, you admitted shooting down this plane, shame on you?
You don't. What ends up happening is you hire the Basij Resistance Force, which is a paramilitary, private military corporation, and you have them go out and enforce things for you in a very brutal fashion. And, this is where the motorcycles and the live ammunition and so on and so forth, so that their police chief can say, well, our forces don't use live ammunition, and we attempt to discipline, these paramilitary groups, but they're not
like the British and the US government saying, well, we don't censor. YouTube and Twitter do, but they're private companies.
Oh dear, yeah. So the protesters were shouting death to the dictator, basically, and these young men came up on motorcycles with firearms and shot a load of people and started to beat them with sticks. So that's what's going on in Iran at the moment.
But it was an interesting, I don't know if you saw that video, where at a university one had once again painted the flags of the United States of America and Israel on the floor with the expectation that everybody trample across the flags on their way to university.
Yeah,
and the students very diligently walked around the flags, refusing to tread on them. with
Yeah, I
the
think that's very
activists who no doubt had painted them on the floor, kind of standing in the middle, shouting at everybody to get in line and start walking over the flags, and they weren't interested.
Mm.
I think it's very very interesting that these activists they invent a form of protest that you must participate in by default, and if you refuse to do so, then instead of choosing to protest, these students had to choose not to protest, if that makes sense. And I think it was a very cunning technique that unfortunately didn't work, but
sounds like the day of absence in America. Choose to protest or not to protest.
Yeah, a bit, yeah.
Yes. Or whatever it is, that it was the day of visibility or something. But yeah, that's the Iran situation at the moment. A bit closer to home, we have the Labour leadership contest ongoing. They've finished their nominations now, so we have I believe it's Keir Starmer, Rebecca Long Bailey, Jess Phillips, Emily Thornberry, and someone called Lisa Nandy, who I've also never heard of before.
Whereas Clive so-and-so, I always forget his surname. For some reason,
Clive
I always
Lewis.
think Clive James. I think he failed at the first hurdle with only managing to secure 5 votes rather than 22. 22 is the minimum, and he got 5.
He knew he was going to get 5, so he quit early so that those votes could be hoovered up by Emily Thornberry. Yeah, who just about manages to get to she actually managed to get her 22nd backer, which is required for her to get in 10 minutes before the nominations closed.
Emily Thornberry being the person who was on Question Time once, advocating that famous Labour line that if Labour came to power, then she, as the Europe minister, I think she was at the time the spokesperson for Europe for the Labour Party, either that or shadow foreign secretary or something like that. But she would have been the person in charge of it if her shadow position was confirmed once in government. That she would then renegotiate with the EU, because of course the Boris's deal was terrible, and it would be a much better deal, and then one would put it to the people in a referendum. And then when she was asked by Dimbleby, or I don't know if that was still Dimbleby, it was more than likely the one that has succeeded him since. Would you so how would you campaign? Oh, I would campaign to stay in the EU. So you would be campaigning against the deal you'd actually negotiated?
Yes, the one you.
Yes.
Yes, it was a very stilted interview from her perspective.
Ouch.
It's like, why would the EU negotiate anything with you? It's like, as soon as they go, so you're going to negotiate with us, and then you're going to campaign to remain anyway, right? Yeah, okay. So here's a deal that favours us heavily anyway. There you go. Make it or make it hard Brexit. That's as close to a deal as you're going to get, and then just campaign against it. Yeah. It's just truly mind-blowing levels of cognitive dissonance from there. So at the moment, it looks like Sir Keir Starmer has 88 nominations, and his closest competitor is Long Bailey on 33. Now, I don't.
But Keir Starmer, in a way, what he is showing is that he has greatest popularity with the Parliamentary Labour Party. But of course, what matters is who actually gets the votes from the membership.
Indeed. And as we say,
Long Bailey more than likely
makes up the ground,
because of course all of the momentum crowd. Because she is not only the anointed successor in a way as far as Jeremy Corbyn is concerned. Apparently, she was also considerably involved with the formulating of policy in the run-up to the election.
Well, she's been very clever. So she formulated Jeremy Corbyn's thing, basically, a lot of the policy for it. She also came out flatly and said what everyone else thinks is utterly insane, and that's because we are more rational people, which is that, Jeremy was like, I supported him the whole way through, I still support him now, I thought he was a great leader and a great man, and he still is. And everyone else is sort of screaming, it's the worst parliamentary defeat for Labour since 1935, what are you on? But I think it's going to go down very, very well with the Corbynista-style activists.
I think that the journalists present at that situation you described there clearly missed a chance, because once she starts telling everybody how wonderful Jeremy Corbyn is, I think that would have been the moment to immediately ask her what her stance is on Hamas and Hezbollah.
Yes, but we all know that none of the mainstream newspapers are going to broach that topic ever. I believe that we should negotiate.
There is, of course, still also the position that Jess Phillips explained that if made Labour leader, she could see herself leading the campaign to rejoin the EU.
Oh, yes.
Because that is the way to win back Workington and Blythe and Stoke. The way to do that is by telling them all that they're all wrong, totally racist and xenophobic.
So Rory Herbert in chat says, I'm for a Rebecca Long Bailey's on the rocks. She sounds like a delicious drink. Sorry, what were you going to say, Sarah?
That was Poe, I think.
Oh, Poe, sorry.
I don't really know any of these candidates other than Jess Phillips, but by the sounds of it, I'm in favour of whichever candidate is going to kill the Labour Party the soonest, which sounds like it might be Jess Phillips. What do you think?
It's probably Jess Phillips because everybody knows her. However,
I reckon it could be Rebecca as well.
However, I think it's more likely to be Rebecca Long Bailey because she is self-styled John McDonnell's protege. So she's the candidate he has put forward, and Jeremy Corbyn supported.
Well, what I would point out is that the current frontrunner, Keir Starmer, he of course was the one who was always arguing, second referendum, changing it so that we stay in the single market, that we stay in the customs union. So even if we leave, we stay. If
you're still inexorably tied by the whips.
That was his argument on the EU. So very much in Jess Phillips' territory there when it comes to those northern constituencies one wants back. But aside from that, do you remember that chap who made the joke about was it Nottingham Airport when that Icelandic volcano blew up and the planes were all grounded? And he made a joke on Twitter saying, if this airport doesn't open by the time my flight is supposed to take off, I'm going to blow it up. And it was obviously a joke, and then he was prosecuted. So basically he was arrested, he was charged, he was prosecuted, he was found guilty, and then he won on appeal. And I believe it was the pub landlord and Stephen Fry who helped him out. And they kind of publicly came out behind him and said, this is ridiculous, this was a joke, and they helped fund his appeal. But it was, in fact, The Guardian long, long ago that had an article in which they made it absolutely plain that it was the public prosecution, the Crown Prosecution Service, that insisted that this was prosecuted. So the prosecutors themselves wanted to drop it. But then the prosecution service, they insisted it be prosecuted.
Yeah.
Who was in charge of the prosecution at the time? Keir Starmer.
Interesting.
So the guy who actually wants to see jokes banned and people punished for those jokes is now wanting to run the Labour Party and, by extension, the country.
Yeah, that's pretty radical. Yeah, I'll give it that. It's almost as if we don't have a good choice of candidates. I mean, not even David Lammy is running, and of course we want Lammy.
I'm gutted about that.
Diane Abbott either. No one wanted to support Diane Abbott. I can't think why.
Lammy.
Chat saying Long Bailey is the real-life Titania McGrath.
Yeah, she looks like her too.
It's quite close, isn't it? I like the
does.
idea of that.
There is something about her, yes.
Mm.
I think there was actually somebody who posted a tweet where the two pictures were next to each other and their glasses look very much like the same model,
Okay.
and basically sort of said, was she part of the inspiration for Titania McGrath?
It's hard to get an answer out of Titania McGrath. She's such a
Well,
radical.
according to the comedian who is behind Titania McGrath, apparently that photo is a sort of composite.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So I think it actually is some sort of drawing or whatever, but it's not one single person. One has taken the characteristics of various people and blended it into one.
I think it's
And
his face,
therefore,
right?
with
And
those
Henry?
glasses being of a similar build, one therefore wonders, have those glasses come from her?
What were you saying, Poe?
I think that the profile picture is actually it seems to look like the comedian himself. So I wonder if it's some sort of feminized version, but severely altered. Maybe that's just me going crazy. There seems to be a similarity.
So he took a picture of himself, put it through a wood chipper, and then photoshopped it to all hell. Yes.
It's called the FaceApp female filter.
Yes. It makes Sargon into very much a beautiful young woman. It's very funny to see Carlita on his Facebook. The speaking of which, people mentioned that if Jess Phillips gets in, Sargon will have a field day. Yes, I believe his plan is to create the Liberals Against Jess Phillips party. If that actually comes to pass, and you didn't hear that from me, but yes, there's that. Oh my goodness, Mira J in chat saying, morning on TV here in Australia. They've just started saying how plane crash protesters are now being fired on. Yes. Unfortunately, Iran seems to be getting quite radical in this regard, and they don't really care what they're protesting about.
Well, the simple truth is they're scared.
Mm.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing this. If they would be confident, they would be handling that in a different manner.
Yeah.
But they're scared.
I think they know really that they're widespread public support, and I have no doubt that there are kind of the equivalent of monarchists out there who are in support of the government. But I think they're a deeply divided country, and they're trying to patch that up and hide it at the same time as appearing strong and united to the West and the East, respectively. Because, of course, they want to maintain their relationships with Russia and China as well. Object of Hate says, 10th anniversary of Haiti earthquake. Should they just give up on the country and evacuate the place for good? I don't know anything about what's going on in Haiti at the moment. I remember when it all kicked off, because 4 of my cousins are actually from Haiti, adopted, and they came across at the time because they were completely unrelated. My aunt and uncle were attempting to adopt because they can't have kids, and they wanted to adopt from Haiti these 2 kids at the time. And everything was going well, and then the earthquake happened, and because they were on the list to be adopted, they actually were airlifted out first thing. They were priority to get them out, and the Belgian government said, we're gonna rush this through, and it doesn't matter about their paperwork or anything like that. They can just come straight into the country because they're provided they are actually children, which they were, so that's good. I don't know what has happened much in the way of destroyed infrastructure and rebuilding in the time since, though. It's not like there are appeals still going on TV. I don't know if anyone else knows anything about it.
Well, it's also not as if they were, how shall we say, a highly developed nation prior to the earthquake.
No, not particularly. No.
I mean, one of the poorest countries on earth.
Yes, that's what the French influence is for you.
I would use Donald Trump's name for them, but I don't want to get the stream to get demonetized.
Oh, it's a bit late for that. What were you going to say?
Well, Haiti was what Donald Trump was calling a shithole country, wasn't he?
It might have been. That might have been the one that they started with, wasn't it? it's not in great shape at the moment. Shall we put it that
Well, I mean,
way?
Sending
there
their
was,
best.
there was Doc Duvalier, and then there was Baby Doc Duvalier, wasn't there? So I mean, they've had their fair share of tyrants. It's always been a fairly sort of lawless place. If you remember, you say the French influence, but of course they are the first independent black nation, really, that sort of broke away.
That's why they speak Creole. Yes.
And therefore, this was a kind of slave rebellion. So they kind of started from that position, if you know what I mean. So you can imagine it was more than likely quite feisty right from the beginning. And you look at it and you just go, yeah, this is one of these countries where you sort of wonder, they had a huge before the slave rebellion, prior to complete French domination, it was a pirate's nest. This is a place that has kind of been completely and utterly chaotic, really, as far back as anybody can really think.
They had a huge issue with sex trafficking over there. I know that was the case, and nothing really got done as far as that. And there were a lot of people who were subsisting, shall we say, by fishing by hand. So
yeah.
That was about it, and a lot of orphanages trying to get children out of the country. But I don't know much about it other than that, and I don't really feel I can comment beyond that. Object of Hate saying, barely anything's rebuilt over there. The country's been in chaos because of protests over the last 3 months, and the president is now ruling by decree because they failed to have an election in November. NGOs basically run a place, which is why nothing works. Tyrants, hurricanes, and earthquakes. It's not going well. It's I don't know how it's going to be sorted out. Let's hope it gets sorted out soon, if only for the poor people who have to suffer under all the chaos that goes on. Muck006 says the Clinton Foundation needs to be forcibly moved there. It's possible. British Knight says
it would be nice to sort of think that they would have to have their headquarters there, wouldn't
for tax purposes, you understand.
On Tortuga Island, yes.
British Knight says, choosing Labour leaders right now is like choosing which STI to have. I'd prefer none, but I'll settle for something I can get rid of quickly. Oh, thanks for that disgusting analogy, British Knight. Mr. Gently Benevolent says, I'm quite disappointed with the Labour leadership. I was half expecting a sudden surge of Lammy support, all suspiciously written in his handwriting. So I still can't believe no one's decided to take it.
I know.
For those of you who don't know, he had a letter of hatred sent to him a couple of months. Must have been a while back now, some months ago. And everyone, we did a kind of handwriting, kind of layman's handwriting analysis, and said this looks awfully familiar to your actual handwriting.
I think he was the one that spotted it first. Yes.
Yeah, he did a good video on that. It's still one of my favourites.
The Academic Agent, yeah. Beautiful. Right. I think I have one last story for this evening, actually, which is here to amuse rather than dismay. And this is about a tortoise. Has anyone heard about the tortoise?
The tortoise which has saved its own species.
Yes, indeed.
And can now retire.
The tortoise with a species-saving sex drive has been returned to the Galapagos.
God bless.
Diego the tortoise was among 14 male tortoises selected to take part in a breeding program where he produced more than 2,000 offspring since it began in the 1960s. They reckon.
I wouldn't refer to that tortoise as Diego. I would refer to that tortoise as Don.
Yes, Don.
Perhaps we can do a compromise and call it Don Diego.
I believe that they tried to translate some of the base animal drives, and all he could say was "Michelle's McLean." But I'm so sorry for that joke, everybody. Diego's sex drive was said to be one of the main reasons they survived. He is responsible, of those 2,000, for over 800 young. And there's some great pictures of him smiling very much so, and of course it is.
Well, perhaps
Smiling.
Genghis might also be a good name for Diego.
What name? Sorry,
Genghis.
Genghis. Yes.
I would just
Well,
think
Genghis Khan.
in-
One has found that in Asia there is a very substantial group of people who seem to share a common ancestor, and one suspects that that common ancestor could have been Genghis Khan.
Well, that's probably the best way of being prolific, right? Because men can obviously, even human men can be, they can get many women pregnant as long as they can find lots of women who aren't already pregnant and who are fertile. And if, of course, you kill lots of their husbands and
Yes, if you're basically going around smashing everything up and
if you
then
don't take no for
basically
an answer.
insisting that the choicest damsels be brought to your tent in the evening, you will get through a goodly number. Yes.
It's almost like he was doing it, raping and pillaging, almost as if it was going out of fashion. Yes, it's not going to be here. What you don't realise is that Genghis Khan realised that the climate change catastrophe was on its way, and he just wanted to get his end away before everything ended 3 months down the line.
He realised that with all the carbon being released from all the cities he burned to the ground.
Yes, he was actually just performing a kind of carbon tax, as it were, on the city. I'm so sorry, on the cities. The Harry Channel says, I expect Britisher will understand this. There is a shortage of high-quality bay rum aftershave due to the hurricanes from the last decade.
There is? Why would I understand this?
I have no idea. This is not something that I understand. Feel free to elucidate us from the chat, Harry. Yes, but this. I
mean, there hasn't been a shortage of sugar, surely. So if there hasn't been a shortage of sugar from the Caribbean, why would there be a shortage of rum? If there isn't a shortage of rum, why would there be a shortage of bay rum aftershave? Somehow I've got the feeling here's a company jacking up the price and they've concocted some sort of excuse.
We'll wait a second to see if what the Harry Channel says, but it's possibly a reference to some film that you should know about, Britisher. I have no idea.
Is it?
Or
I don't know.
Oh, he just says you sadden me. That's as much of a response as you're gonna get.
Yeah, never meet your heroes.
Yeah, or never super chat them about things that you expect them to understand. You'll be disappointed. What am I saying? No, super chat all the time. Everything that you need, you need to know. Thank you to everyone very much for tuning in to Fake Accents Unite this evening. It's truly been wonderful. Thank you very much to my guests. Thank you to the Britisher.
Oh well, it passed the time.
It's an honour and a privilege. Say the lines that I've...
It's an honour and a privilege.
I'm going to... No fish food for you this evening. I don't think that you're getting your usual bath tomorrow. Good evening. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to Sarah for coming along. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you very much to Poe for coming along as well.
If I can take the liberty, I'd like to plug my stream, which I hope to be doing tomorrow, but before the Unpopular Opinion stream, which I expect a lot of people here will be watching. So if you're waiting for that to start, head over to my channel. You can listen to that. Sorry, Mark, I know that was shameless.
That's quite all right. I was going
What's your channel called, Poe?
Poe the Person. You're telling me you're not subscribed, Sarah?
Oh, brutal.
I wasn't sure if it was. I wasn't sure if the stream was the same name. That was all.
Now that she's a high roller with the likes of Ed Dutton and Millennial Woes, she has no need for us anymore.
I was asking for the benefit of the chat. You're not doing a job, Mark.
You notice that this is merely a humble shill for your content, Sarah. That's all that is. Harry Channel elucidates us further. Says sugar doesn't come from bay trees. The hurricanes ravaged the trees. So there's that.
Here's what he's talking about.
What the wider context is about a lack of bay tree aftershave, who knows? But on that note, it is time to end. So let's go and just chiming in with a last second super chat there, saying, "Did anyone call for us Danes? Did any of us call for the Danes at all?"
No,
I
think
think
ever called for the Danes.
He's referring, of course, to the raping and pillaging of Genghis Khan. because of course the Danes and their boats like to do their fair share of pillaging.
No one ever calls for the Danes. The
themselves.
Danes, by principle, are surplus to requirement.
You're expected to be a surprise at Scone. We can't call for you. You simply appear when you're most needed. That's the general idea. But thank you very much to the guests. Thank you very much to the audience for turning up. It's been wonderful to have you here. And we'll see you next time. Thank you and have a great week.
Down with Wagner.
Britisher!